The crash and the rescue. The cold silence of space was broken by a single distress signal. A small red light blinked on the control panel of Daniel Carter's ship, the Valkyrie. He frowned, staring at the screen. The signal was weak but urgent. "A ship in trouble," Daniel muttered. "Way out here." He checked the coordinates. The signal came from a war zone, a battlefield where two alien factions had fought and destroyed each other. Ships, broken and burning, floated lifeless in the dark void. Daniel hesitated. He was a mercenary, not a hero. But something about this signal felt different. With a sigh, he pushed the throttle forward. Valkyrie soared through the wreckage, dodging debris. His scanners locked onto the source, a small escape pod, barely holding together. The hull was cracked, and oxygen levels were dropping fast. Daniel activated the ship's robotic arms and pulled the pod into his cargo bay. He jumped from his seat and ran to check inside. The pod's door hissed open, revealing the motionless figure inside. Daniel's breath caught. It was a woman. An alien woman. She had deep blue skin, long silver hair, and faintly glowing eyes that fluttered open for a second before closing again. Her breathing was weak. Daniel noticed something else. Her stomach was swollen. She was pregnant. "Damn," he muttered. "This just got complicated." The rescue. Daniel carried the woman to the medical bed in his ship's small med bay. He scanned her vitals. She had injuries, bruises, cuts, and low oxygen levels. She had barely survived. As he worked to stabilize her, she stirred, her eyes opening weakly. Fear and exhaustion filled her face. "You're safe," Daniel said quickly, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "I found your pod drifting." Her lips parted. Her voice was soft but urgent. They are coming." Daniel frowned. "Who?" Before she could answer, the Valkyrie's alarm blared. Daniel's stomach tightened. He rushed back to the cockpit and checked the radar. 3 enemy ships were approaching fast. "Damn it," he muttered. "They must have been hunting her." Daniel had no idea who she was, but he knew one thing: whoever was coming didn't want to talk. The chase begins. He slammed into the pilot's seat and powered up the engines. The enemy ships locked on to his position. A warning appeared: missiles incoming. "Not today," Daniel growled. He twisted the controls, and the Valkyrie dived sharply. The first missile barely missed, exploding behind him. The woman gasped from the med bay. "They will not stop." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Then neither will I." He activated countermeasures, releasing a swarm of decoy drones. 2 missiles exploded against the fakes, but the enemy ships kept coming. His fingers flew across the controls. He spotted a nearby asteroid field. It was risky, but better than getting shot down. "Hold on," he shouted. The Valkyrie dove into the asteroids. Huge space rocks floated in the darkness, colliding with each other. The enemy ships followed, firing plasma bolts. Daniel weaved through the deadly maze, dodging the glowing blue shots. One enemy ship got too close. A spinning asteroid smashed into it, tearing it apart. "2 left," Daniel muttered. The woman suddenly clutched her stomach, gasping in pain. Daniel's eyes flicked to the med bay camera. She was struggling to breathe. He had to end this quickly. Spinning the ship sharply, Daniel aimed at a narrow gap between 2 massive asteroids. He squeezed through just in time. The chasing ships weren't so lucky. The first enemy ship crashed into a rock, exploding in a fiery blast. The second pilot tried to pull up but clipped a smaller asteroid, sending it spinning off course into deep space. Safe, for now. Daniel let out a breath. That was close. The ship's warning lights faded, and the radar showed no more threats nearby. He turned back to the woman. She lay there, her breathing still shaky but steadier than before. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, there was something in her gaze, a mix of relief, fear, and something deeper. She spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand. They will keep coming. My children. They must survive. Daniel stared at her. Children. His heart pounded. He had just stepped into something far bigger than he realized. Cliffhanger. Who is she? Daniel sat down, running a hand through his hair. This was supposed to be just another day in space. Instead, he had just saved an alien woman carrying mysterious children, children that powerful enemies wanted dead. And now he had a target on his back. Escape and the mystery of the twins. Daniel Carter sat in the cockpit of the Valkyrie, his hands still gripping the controls tightly. The adrenaline from the chase hadn't faded yet. Outside, the asteroid field drifted in the cold vacuum of space, silent and still, his only cover for now. Behind him, the woman he had rescued lay weakly on the medbay bed, her glowing eyes half open. She was alive. That was the good news. The bad news. He had no idea who she was, why she was being hunted, or what the hell he had just gotten himself into. Daniel exhaled and walked back to her. She barely had the strength to turn her head, but she tried. "You should have left me," she whispered, her voice filled with exhaustion. Daniel smirked. "Yeah, well, I'm bad at following smart advice." He folded his arms. "Now, are you going to tell me why a squad of killers was chasing you through deep space?" She hesitated, as if weighing how much to say. Finally, she took a slow, painful breath. "My name is Zira Veneri, Princess of the Velari Empire, or what's left of it." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Velari. He had heard of them. A powerful alien race, once rulers of a great empire that collapsed after a civil war. Most were either dead or scattered refugees. "And let me guess," he said, "the people chasing you. Not big fans of yours." She nodded. "The Zarkians. They destroyed my homeworld, and they won't stop until they erase my bloodline completely." Daniel frowned. "Bloodline? What do they want with you?" Zira's hand weakly moved to her stomach. "They want my children. The mystery of the twins." Daniel stared at her, confusion clear on his face. "They're hunting you, because of your unborn kids." Zira's eyes flickered. "Not just any children." She swallowed, as if the words she was about to say carried a weight too heavy to bear. "They are twin hairs, marked by fate. The last of the true Velari." She exhaled slowly. "And according to the prophecy, their protector will decide the future of my people." Daniel blinked. "Protector?" He frowned. "And let me guess, you don't have one." Zira's gaze turned sharp, locking onto him. "I do now." The words hung between them. Daniel stiffened. Whoa, hold on. Just because I saved you doesn't mean I signed up for babysitting duty." She closed her eyes briefly, her energy fading. "You don't understand. They have already chosen you." Daniel took a step back. "What does that even mean?" Before Zira could answer, the ship's warning alarm blared through the cockpit. Daniel turned sharply to the control panel. His blood ran cold. The Zarkians had found them. Again. The second attack. Daniel sprinted to the controls, bringing up the radar. 2 ships, smaller than before, but faster. They had entered the asteroid field, hunting like wolves. He cursed under his breath. "They don't give up, do they?" Zira forced herself up despite the pain. "We must leave. If they catch us, they will kill you first. Then take my children." Daniel's fingers danced over the controls, prepping the engines. The Valkyrie hummed with power, ready to move. But before he could punch the thrusters, the ship lurched violently. The whole cabin shook, throwing him against the console. "What the hell?" Zira gasped. "They disabled our engines. They're boarding us." Daniel's stomach twisted. He hated close combat. Space battles. Fine. Chases. Sure. But face-to-face fights on his own ship. That was bad news. He grabbed his pulse pistol from the weapons locker and turned to Zira. "Stay here. If things go bad, hide. Don't make a sound." She reached for him, her hand gripping his wrist weakly. "You don't understand, Daniel. If they step aboard, they will sense the twins." Daniel's brow furrowed. Sense them? Zira's glowing eyes burned with intensity. They are more than just children. Their energy, their presence, is like a beacon. Daniel didn't have time to ask more questions. The sound of metal cutting echoed through the ship. The enemy was breaking through the airlock. The battle inside the Valkyrie. Daniel took a deep breath. He positioned himself near the doorway, gun aimed forward. The airlock burst open, and 2 Zarkian warriors stormed in. They were tall, reptilian creatures, covered in black armor, their eyes glowing red. The first one lunged at Daniel, but he was faster. Bang! A clean shot to the head sent the first Zarkian crashing to the floor. The second roared, raising a plasma blade. Daniel rolled sideways, dodging the deadly strike. He fired, but the Zarkian deflected the shot with his blade. Daniel cursed. Great, they brought the fancy ones. The Zarkian charged, knocking Daniel to the ground. The alien's claws pressed against his throat. "You will die first, human," the Zarkian hissed. "Then we take the twins." A sudden glow filled the room. The Zarkian stopped, frozen in place. His eyes widened in horror. Daniel twisted his head and saw it. Zira had stood up, her hands glowing with pure energy. And behind her, a faint aura surrounded her stomach. The twins were responding. The power awakens. The ship shook again, but this time it wasn't from an attack. Something powerful was waking up inside Zira. The Zarkian screamed, stumbling backward as if the very air around him burned. His armor cracked, his red eyes turning to black voids. Daniel grabbed his gun and fired one last shot. The Zarkian fell to the ground, lifeless. Daniel slowly stood, breathing hard. What the hell was that? Zira collapsed into the medbay bed, her energy fading again. "Their power is beginning to awaken," she whispered, "and they have chosen you." Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. This was way bigger than anything he had signed up for. But it was too late to turn back now. He wasn't just running from enemies anymore. He was protecting 2 beings with powers beyond imagination, beings that had somehow bonded with him. And if Zira was right, the twins would decide the fate of an entire empire, the birth and the bond. The Valkyrie drifted through space, hidden among the shattered remains of an ancient battlefield. It was a temporary refuge, but Daniel knew it wouldn't last long. The Zarkians would come again. They always did. But right now, the biggest danger wasn't outside. It was inside. Zira lay on the medbay bed, sweat glistening on her blue skin. Her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps, and her hands clutched her stomach. Pain twisted her face. Daniel didn't need to be an expert to see what was happening. She was going into labor. "Damn it," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "This is the worst possible time." Zira's glowing eyes snapped open, locking onto him. "It is time," she said, her voice hoarse but certain. Daniel exhaled. "Yeah, I kinda figured that out." He had fought bounty hunters, space pirates, and rogue AI machines, but delivering alien babies, that was a new one. And yet, somehow, he knew he couldn't walk away. The birth begins. The ship's AI flickered to life. Ning, crew member showing signs of extreme distress. "No kidding," Daniel muttered. He grabbed a sterilized cloth from the medical storage and knelt beside Zira. Her breathing was fast, almost frantic. The glow beneath her skin pulsed, and energy crackled faintly around her. Daniel hesitated. "Okay, I've patched up blaster wounds and set broken bones, but this is way out of my expertise." Zira's fingers dug into his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You must help. There is no one else." Daniel clenched his jaw. She was right. He took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this." A birth unlike any other. Time blurred into chaos. Zyra's body trembled, and her energy grew stronger, filling the ship's cabin with an eerie blue light. Daniel worked fast, following Zyra's weak instructions between her sharp breaths. Then, a cry filled the air. Daniel froze. His heart pounded as he looked down. In his hands was a small, delicate child, its skin a mix of deep blue and faint silver, its eyes glowing softly. Daniel swallowed. "It's a boy." Zyra gasped in relief, but before she could speak, another wave of energy surged through her. Daniel barely had time to prepare before the second child was born. "A girl," he whispered, staring at the newborn. Her tiny fingers reached out, wrapping around his thumb. Her eyes glowed brighter than her brother's. But something was wrong. The twins recognized their master. The moment both babies were born, the air shifted. Daniel felt it first, a strange pull deep inside his chest. It was unlike anything he had experienced before. Zyra, weak but watching, suddenly stiffened. Daniel looked down. The twins were staring at him. Not in the way newborns should. Their eyes glowed, and a strange energy flowed between them and Daniel. The girl reached out first, her tiny hand pressing against his chest. The boy followed, his fingers curling around Daniel's wrist. And then, a flood of emotions, images, and sensations hit him all at once. He saw visions, ancient battles, alien warriors kneeling before glowing figures, an empire falling into darkness. He saw himself, standing at the center of it all, the twins by his side. A voice echoed in his mind. "You are chosen." Daniel gasped, stumbling back, breaking the connection. His hands shook. "What the hell was that?" he muttered. Zyra, breathing heavily, stared at him. "They have bonded with you," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "No, whatever just happened, that's impossible." Zyra's lips trembled. "It is fate." The weight of her words sank into him. He had saved her. He had saved her children. And now, they saw him as their protector. The enemy approaches. Before Daniel could even process this, the ship's alarm blared again. "Incoming hostile is DTCT." Daniel spun toward the cockpit. His stomach dropped. 5 Zarkian warships, bigger than before, stronger. He clenched his jaw. They knew. Somehow, they felt what had just happened. Zyra's voice was weak but urgent. They sensed the twins' birth. Daniel turned toward her. "Then we have no choice." He picked up his blaster and turned toward the control panel. "We fight." Zyra tried to sit up. "You don't understand. You are now part of something bigger than you can imagine." Daniel smirked, gripping the flight controls. "Lady, I think I got the message when your newborn kids burned their way into my soul." He punched the engines. The Valkyrie roared to life, shooting forward. The battle was about to begin. And Daniel Carter. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for his twins. The hunters arrive. The Valkyrie streaked through space, its engines burning hot as Daniel Carter pushed the ship to its limits. He gritted his teeth, fingers flying across the controls. Behind him, 5 Zarkian warships closed in, their dark forms cutting through the void like blades. They weren't just here to kill. They were here to capture. Daniel's gut twisted. They wanted the twins. The chase begins. A sharp warning blared through the ship. "Incoming missiles." Daniel twisted the controls. The Valkyrie spun sideways, barely dodging the first projectile. The explosion rocked the ship, throwing Zyra against the medbay wall. Daniel cursed. "Hold on." Another missile locked onto them. Daniel hit the countermeasures. A cluster of decoy drones shot out, scattering the enemy sensors. The missile veered off course, smashing into an asteroid. But the Zarkians weren't giving up. A transmission crackled through the comms. A deep, hissing voice filled the cabin. "Human, you are interfering in matters beyond your understanding." Daniel scoffed, adjusting the shields. "Yeah, well, that seems to be my specialty. A low growl echoed from the enemy ship. "Surrender the twins, and you may live." Daniel didn't bother replying. He cut the comms. Then he grabbed his pulse blaster, checked the energy levels, and turned to Zira. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," he admitted. "Got any magic tricks up your sleeve?" Zira, still weak from childbirth, managed to sit up. Her silver eyes glowed faintly, her skin pulsing with residual energy from the birth. I can try," she whispered. "But I need time." Daniel grimaced. "Time is something we don't have." Another explosion rocked the ship. Sparks flew from the control panels. The shields were failing. Nowhere left to run. Daniel checked the nav system. They needed a plan. Fast. His eyes flicked to the star map. Just ahead was a nebula storm, a dense cloud of ionized gas and charged lightning, a suicidal place to fly into, which made it perfect. He twisted the controls. The Valkyrie banked hard, speeding toward the storm. The Zarkians hesitated. Even they knew the storm was deadly. Daniel smirked. "That's right. You want to play. Come and get me." The ship shot into the nebula. Static energy crackled around them as blue lightning danced through the cloud. The hull groaned under the pressure. Zira gasped, clutching the twins' clothes. "Are you insane?" Daniel grinned. "Only when necessary." The comms crackled again. The Zarkians had followed. "You cannot escape." They weren't bluffing. The enemy ships activated energy shields, pushing deeper into the storm. Their targeting systems flickered, but they were still tracking him. Daniel's mind raced. He needed a way to turn the fight. Then he noticed something on the sensors, a massive space wreck drifting deep in the nebula. A derelict Velari warship. His heart pounded. This was Zavira's people. It was old, its hull scarred from long-forgotten battles. But the energy signature was faintly active. A crazy idea hit him. He turned to Zira. "That ship, can you power it up?" Zira's glowing eyes widened in shock. "It's ancient. It hasn't been used in centuries." Daniel grinned. "Then let's wake it up." The twins awakened their power. Zira hesitated. Then she looked down at the twins. They were still, their glowing eyes staring into the air as if sensing something. A faint hum filled the cabin. Daniel's skin tingled. The twins were doing something. Then, a pulse of energy burst from them. The nebula storm shuddered. The derelict warship's engines flickered to life. Daniel's mouth went dry. "Oh, hell." The warship moved. Ancient thrusters fired, breaking it free from the storm's grip. Its hull glowed faintly, the old Velari markings shimmering under the lightning. The Zarkians noticed. Their leader's voice growled through the comms. "Impossible." Daniel smirked. "Not impossible. Just unexpected." The old warship locked onto the enemy fleet. Turrets activated. Weapons powered up. And then, as if answering the call of the twins, it opened fire. The battle turns. The Zarkians scrambled as the Velari warship's cannons unleashed destruction. Plasma fire tore through space. 2 enemy ships were instantly obliterated. Daniel swooped in for the kill. His fingers flew over the weapon's controls. The Valkyrie fired a rapid burst, tearing through the shields of another enemy ship. The explosion sent debris scattering into the storm. The last 2 enemy ships panicked. One tried to escape, but the Velari warship, somehow piloted by the twins' energy, hunted it down. A blast of concentrated plasma ripped it apart. Only one enemy remained. The Zarkian commander's voice was laced with fury. "You will regret this, human." Then his ship vanished into hyperspace. The battle was over. What just happened? The Valkyrie drifted in silence. Daniel let out a breath, rubbing his face. That was insane. Zira still stared at the Velari warship, her expression unreadable. "They awakened it," she whispered. Daniel turned to the twins, still quiet, still glowing. Their tiny hands gripped his shirt, their expressions peaceful. "They bonded with it," Zira said. The warship answered them. Daniel exhaled. This was bigger than he had thought. Not only were the twins special, they were connected to their ancestors' lost technology. Which meant one thing. The Zarkians would never stop coming. A new mission. Zira turned to him, her voice steady. We cannot run forever. The Zarkians will return, with more ships, more soldiers. They will not stop until they take my children. Daniel sighed, adjusting his blaster. Yeah, I kinda figured. Her silver eyes burned. We need allies. We need a safe place. Daniel smirked. Well, lucky for you. I know a few people who might help. He turned the ship toward the stars. The hunt wasn't over. But now, they were ready for it. Escape to the forbidden zone. The Valkyrie hummed as it drifted through deep space, away from the wreckage of battle. Daniel Carter sat in the pilot's chair, one hand resting on the control panel, the other gripping a cup of coffee. Cold, bitter, but the only thing keeping him awake. His ship had taken a beating. His energy reserves were running low, and his passengers were more than just ordinary refugees. He turned his head slightly, glancing toward the back of the ship. Zira was resting, exhaustion still clinging to her after giving birth. The twins, barely a few hours old, lay bundled in a protective cocoon of soft fabric, their glowing eyes half closed but always aware. Daniel had fought for his life many times before, but this time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for them. And if Zira was right, the twins weren't just children. They were the key to something far bigger. A dangerous decision. Daniel pulled up the star maps, staring at the shifting display of planets, nebulas, and restricted zones. Zira stirred behind him. Where are we going? Daniel glanced at her. Somewhere safe. Somewhere the Zarkians won't find us. Her silver eyes studied him. There is no such place. Daniel smirked. There is one. The forbidden zone. Zira tensed. You can't be serious. Daniel shrugged. I'm very serious. The forbidden zone was a place no sane pilot entered. It was an uncharted sector of space, filled with rumors of dead worlds, lost civilizations, and things far worse than Zarkians. But that's exactly why it was the perfect place to hide. Zira shook her head. No one who goes there ever comes back. Daniel leaned back, sipping his coffee. Then we'll be the first. Zira frowned. Why risk it? Daniel's expression darkened. Because the Zarkians aren't just hunting us anymore. They know what the twins can do. They won't stop coming. And next time, they'll bring a whole fleet. He gestured to the map. This is our only chance to disappear. Zira was silent for a long moment. Then she looked down at the twins. Finally, she nodded. Then we go. Daniel punched in the coordinates. The Valkyrie's engines roared to life. The descent into darkness. The forbidden zone was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. The moment they entered, all the stars vanished. It was pure darkness. No distant suns, no planetary beacons, nothing. Just an endless black void. Even the Valkyrie's sensors struggled to work. Zira hugged the twins closer. I don't like this. Daniel gritted his teeth. Yeah, well, neither do I. The ship moved cautiously through the dark. Every second, Daniel expected something to jump out of the void and tear them apart. Then, something flickered on the radar. A massive structure. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What the hell is that? Zira turned pale. It can't be. The lost city of the Velari. As the Valkyrie drew closer, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. It wasn't just a structure. It was a city. A massive, ancient metropolis, floating in the void, its towers cracked but still standing. Strange blue energy ran through its ruins, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Zira pressed a hand to her lips. The last city. Daniel frowned. You know this place. Zira swallowed hard. This was the final refuge of my ancestors. When the Velari Empire fell, the survivors fled here, but no one ever returned. Daniel narrowed his eyes. So what happened to them? Zira didn't answer. Because she didn't know. And that made it even worse. Ghosts of the past. Daniel guided the Valkyrie toward a landing platform, scanning for any signs of life. Nothing. Just silence. As they disembarked, the air around them felt heavy, like something unseen was watching. The buildings were ancient but still pulsing with strange energy. "This place is alive," Daniel muttered. Zira stepped forward, her hand touching one of the glowing walls. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the ground trembled. Suddenly, holographic figures flickered to life all around them. Daniel's hand shot to his blaster. What the hell? The holograms were Velari warriors, but they weren't real. They were recordings. Echoes of the past. A deep voice filled the air. "To those who find this place, you are too late." Daniel and Zira froze. The hologram shifted, revealing a Velari general, his expression grim. "We fought, but we could not hold. The enemy was stronger, darker. It was not the Zarkians who ended us. It was something else." Daniel and Zira exchanged a look. Something else. The hologram flickered again. "If you are Velari, know this. The children of our bloodline are the key. They are the last hope." Daniel glanced at the twins. His stomach twisted. Then, the hologram glitched violently. A sudden, eerie whisper filled the air. "They are still here, watching, waiting." And then, for the first time since they landed, the twins began to cry. Zira's eyes widened. "We're not alone." Daniel drew his blaster. "Yeah, I noticed. The shadow that watches." The city was no longer silent. Something stirred in the darkness. A low, unnatural growl echoed through the ruins. Daniel's grip tightened on his gun. "We need to leave. Now." Zira, holding the twins close, froze. Her silver eyes widened in horror. She was staring at something behind Daniel. He didn't hesitate. He spun around, gun raised. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt something he had never truly felt before. Pure fear. A shadow stood in the distance. It had no face, no true form, but its eyes burned like dying stars. And then it moved. Revelation of the past. The air inside the ancient Velari city was thick, heavy with the scent of dust, and something far worse, something unnatural. Daniel Carter's grip tightened around his pulse blaster as he stared at the shadowed figure looming in the distance. It had no true shape, only a shifting, twisting void that pulsed with unnatural hunger. Its eyes burned like dying stars, staring directly at him, at Zira, at the twins. The twins had stopped crying. Now their glowing eyes were wide open, locked onto the entity as if they understood something Daniel didn't. A deep, inhuman whisper echoed from the darkness. "You should not have come." Daniel didn't hesitate. He fired. The plasma bolt ripped through the air and passed straight through the shadow. The entity didn't move, didn't flinch. The shot simply vanished into the void. Daniel cursed under his breath. "Yeah, figures." The whisper came again, deeper this time, resonating through the entire city. "Your weapons are meaningless here, human." The warning from the dead. Suddenly, the holographic projections around them flickered violently. More ghostly figures appeared. Velari warriors, civilians, children. Echoes of a time long lost. The air trembled. The city's very foundation shook as something ancient reawakened. A final hologram materialized. It was not just another soldier. It was a Velari high priestess, her form shimmering with blue energy, her silver eyes locking onto Zira and the twins. Her voice was urgent. "You must leave this place. The darkness has already won." Zira took a step forward. What darkness? The hologram's face twisted in sorrow. "The ones who devour, the Forsaken." Daniel's blood ran cold. What the hell are the Forsaken? The shadows around them shifted. The whisper came again. This time, closer. "We were once like them. Daniel's heart pounded. Like who? The entity's form shimmered, twisting. And then, for the first time, it became clear. Velari armor, a once proud warrior. But its body was no longer flesh. It was a living void, a hunger beyond death. Zyra's breath caught in her throat. No, it's impossible. Daniel glanced at her. What? Zyra's hands trembled. These are my people, she whispered. The lost Velari. They never died. The curse of the Forsaken. Daniel's stomach twisted. The Velari survivors never disappeared. They had been consumed, changed. They had become something else. The High Priestess hologram flickered, her voice filled with sorrow. We did not flee. We were trapped. The shadows around them stirred, whispering. And now, you are too. Daniel's instincts screamed in OV. He grabbed Zyra's wrist and pulled her back. We're leaving. Now. But the moment they turned, the city came alive. The ground cracked. Towers collapsed. The Forsaken lunged. The race against death. Daniel fired again, knowing it was useless, but anything to slow them down. Zyra clutched the twins' clothes, running beside him as the shadows crawled across the walls, the floors, the very air itself. Daniel's mind raced. There had to be a way out. Then, the twins screamed. Not in fear. In anger. A pulse of pure white energy burst from them. The Forsaken shrieked, recoiling. Daniel's eyes widened. They can hurt them. Zyra gasped. It's their bloodline. They are the last true heirs of the Velari. The Forsaken fear them. Daniel didn't waste another second. Then let's use that to our advantage. He turned, raising his voice. Kids, if you can hear me, do that again. The twins stared at him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, they raised their tiny hands. A shockwave of light erupted from their small bodies. The Forsaken screamed in agony. Their shadows burned away, retreating into the cracks of the ruins. Daniel didn't wait. He grabbed Zyra's arm and ran full speed back to the ship. The escape from the city. The Valkyrie loomed ahead, its engines still hot. Daniel slammed the door control panel the moment they got inside. The ship's hull sealed shut just as a Forsaken lunged at them. It slammed against the glass. Its glowing, empty eyes stared straight into Daniel's soul. Then, it whispered, "They belong to us." Daniel punched the thrusters. The Valkyrie shot into the void, leaving the city behind. The truth revealed. The silence inside the ship was suffocating. Daniel sat in the cockpit, breathing heavily. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. Zyra sat beside him, cradling the twins. They were quiet now, but their eyes still glowed faintly, their small bodies exhausted from whatever power they had just used. Zyra's voice was soft, distant. They weren't just warriors, she whispered. They were guardians, protectors of the Empire. Daniel exhaled. And now they're monsters. Zyra nodded. The Forsaken. The ones who were consumed by darkness. Daniel glanced at the Valkyrie's rear cameras, watching as the city slowly disappeared behind them. They said something before we left, he muttered. Zyra turned to him. What? Daniel's voice was grim. They said the twins belonged to them. Zyra's breath hitched. That means they're not done hunting us. Daniel gritted his teeth. Zarkians were one thing. But now, they were running from something even worse. And somehow, he knew this was only the beginning. The final stand. And the twins' choice. The Valkyrie soared through deep space, engines humming with raw energy as Daniel Carter gripped the flight controls. His heart was still pounding from their escape from the Forsaken. Beside him, Zyra sat in silence, her silver eyes distant. The twins were nestled in her arms, their glowing gazes fixed on something unseen. Daniel exhaled, his hands tightening around the controls. This isn't over, he muttered. Zyra nodded. No, it has only begun. The warning. A sudden blip appeared on the radar. Daniel's stomach clenched. "We've got incoming." Zira stiffened. The Forsaken. Daniel checked the scanner. Not this time. A deep hissing voice crackled through the comms. "Human, you have taken what belongs to us." Daniel gritted his teeth. The Zarkians had found them. He flipped on the external cameras. Outside, a fleet of Zarkian warships emerged from hyperspace, their sleek black hulls reflecting the void. Daniel cursed. "They really don't give up, do they?" Zira held the twins closer. "They know what the children are now." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yeah. And what exactly are they?" Zira's voice was soft, but firm. "They are the last true heirs of Velari." She turned to Daniel. "And you are their guardian." Daniel scoffed. "Me? I'm just a guy who stumbled into this mess." Zira's gaze was unwavering. "No, you were chosen." Daniel exhaled sharply. There was no running anymore. This was their final stand. The Zarkian ultimatum. The Zarkian fleet closed in, their lead warship broadcasting another message. "Surrender the children, and you may yet live." Daniel leaned forward, switching on his own transmission. His voice was cold. "Yeah, about that. You can go to hell." Silence. Then, the enemy fired. The battle begins. The first plasma bolts struck the Valkyrie's shields, sending the ship into a violent spin. Daniel fought the controls, his fingers moving with instinct. "Hold on." He banked hard, dodging another barrage. The Valkyrie wasn't built for full-scale war, but it was fast. Zira placed a hand on the control panel, her silver eyes narrowing. Suddenly, the ship's energy spiked. Daniel's breath hitched. "What the?" The twins' eyes glowed brighter. A pulse of ancient energy surged through the Valkyrie's systems. The ship moved faster, reacting before Daniel even touched the controls. Zira's voice was barely a whisper. "They are guiding us." Daniel grinned. "Well, if they want to help, let's give these bastards a fight." He yanked the ship into a sudden loop, dodging an enemy missile by mere meters. The countermeasures fired automatically, taking out 2 pursuing fighters. The twins' energy flared. Suddenly, the stars around them bent. The arrival of the lost fleet. A deep rumble echoed through space. Daniel's eyes widened as a portal of crackling blue energy tore open behind them. And then they came. Velari warships. Dozens. No, hundreds. Sleek, powerful vessels, long thought extinct, shimmered into existence. Their hulls pulsed with the same energy as the twins. Zira covered her mouth in shock. The lost fleet. Daniel blinked. "I'm gonna take a wild guess and say that's a good thing." The lead Velari warship broadcasted a message. A deep, regal voice filled the cockpit. "The heirs have awakened. The Velari rise once more." Daniel let out a breath. "Well, that's new." The final battle. The Zarkians panicked. Their fleet immediately shifted formation, scrambling to retreat. But it was too late. The Velari warships opened fire. Blazing blue energy tore through the Zarkian forces. The once mighty fleet was reduced to wreckage in seconds. Daniel leaned back, watching in stunned silence. "Dan." Zira, still holding the twins, smiled softly. "The war is not over, but this battle is won." The twins' choice. The Valkyrie drifted in the aftermath of the battle. The Velari fleet surrounded them, waiting. Daniel turned to Zira. "So what now?" She exhaled. "Now, the children must choose." Daniel frowned. "Choose what?" Zira's eyes shimmered. "Their path." She placed the twins on the floor of the ship. Immediately, the air shifted. The twins floated, their glowing eyes scanning both Daniel and Zira. Then, a whisper filled the cabin. "Guardian." Daniel's chest tightened. He felt a pull deep in his bones. The twins raised their hands. A bright pulse of energy surrounded him. He saw visions, entire galaxies, ancient battles, an empire waiting to be reborn. And then, finally, he saw himself, not as a mercenary, not as a simple pilot, but as a protector, as their chosen guardian. When the light faded, Daniel gasped. The twins reached for him. The message was clear. They had chosen him. The dawn of a new era. Zyra's voice was soft. It is done. Daniel exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Guess that means I'm stuck with you guys now. Zyra smirked. Indeed. The Velari fleet moved into formation. Their leader's voice echoed once more. The Guardian has been chosen. The Empire shall rise again. Daniel smirked, gripping the Valkyrie's controls. All right then. He stared into the stars. Let's get to work.